As European leaders gathered at the G20 in South Africa, we turn to two seasoned voices for clarity. From Berlin, Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, former diplomatic and security policy advisor to Chancellor Helmut Kohl, and from Washington by Mr. Dan Rene, a political researcher specializing in transatlantic relations. Both will offer insight into the strategic logic driving U.S. pressure on Kiev. We invited them to walk with us through what's at stake, how Europe is reacting, and what could happen next. So welcome to Q News, gentlemen. I will start with you, Mr. Bitterlich. Now, how do European leaders interpret Washington's reported deadline for Ukraine to sign a framework by next Thursday?
Well, if you look at the leader's statement on Ukraine from Johannesburg this afternoon, they consider this draft as a basis, but which will require additional work. It's expressed in a diplomatic way that especially the Europeans are not at all satisfied by the 28 points developed by the Americans with the Russians. Because when you look at these 28 points, well, these are territorial sacrifices, vague guarantees, there's a risk of security for Europe, not to forget, and, well, it's for the Ukrainians a bitter surrender to some extent. And therefore, you have two winners at the end of the day. I don't know how my American colleague is seeing this. The real winner is Putin, first of all, when you look at all the different points there. And at the same time, the US. The Europeans, well, second rank, and the Ukrainians have to take it.
Mr. Rene, from Washington's perspective, what drives the urgency behind this reported ultimatum?
Well, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's really an interesting moment in diplomacy. This meeting, at least the agenda item for the peace plan that the White House has unveiled, this wasn't planned. This is moving incredibly quickly, and I think the Europeans are thinking that the speed of which this plan is moving is outpacing their ability to help shape it. So, the fact that this was added to the G20 meeting here at the last minute does reflect that there are serious discussions underway on this geopolitical shift that we're looking at here, and it impacts the continent's long-term security. So this isn't just about Ukraine's future. This is about Europe's role. This is about decisions that it might define the next, 100 years, 1,000 years. I mean, this is something that the Europeans can't afford to be sidelined, where the stakes are so high in these negotiations. And again, the speed of what we're looking at here, again, we've been here before, unfortunately, where there's been meetings, incredible optimism, and then a disappointment. Whether that was the meeting with President Putin in Alaska, Zelensky coming to the White House, the European leaders coming to the White House. Again, it is definitely a new idea, a new plan here. But what I am remaining optimistic about, even though we've been disappointed so many times here, is that we're talking about peace. We're talking about trying to find a solution. And, I think an imperfect solution, or at least discussions about it, are far better than accepting this indefinite war that we've seen for so long.
Yes,
so,
but
again,
this
I think
accelerated development, Mr. Rene, was really surprising, right?
Incredibly surprising. Again, I don't think that anyone was necessarily expecting this. And again, I think that the fact that this has been added to the G20 agenda here at the last minute, where the United States is not even going to be there, by the way. I mean, Trump in the White House and the Americans are boycotting this meeting of the G20 for reasons completely different from these peace plan negotiations. But this is the speed here is something that again it's important. Things are moving very quickly. But the stakes are higher for Europe than they are for Washington, and it's important that the Europeans have their voices represented. And again, I think that for the White House, for Trump, and for the U.S., I mean, again, a negotiated peace is even if it's not a perfect one. Is the right discussion to be having, and if it leads towards the end of the war, all the better. Again, I don't think that there's going to be a blanket acceptance of this plan, but let's talk about it. Let's find a pathway forward where we can have something that both Russia and Ukraine can agree to. Because again, Europe can't make the decision. The United States can't make the decision. The only people who can are Ukraine and Russia.
Exactly. Mr. Bitterlich, now European leaders are reportedly coordinating at the G20. So what does this signal about internal EU cohesion or an anxiety, if we may use the word?
We have to see clearly today we work at the European level within a core group. This is France and Germany, and you have to add in security matters a third country to this core group, which is no more a member of the EU, is Great Britain. And these three nations are working here as a core group, and they have taken at the same table the other Europeans present their place. This means the Italian Prime Minister, the President of Finland, who is an excellent personality, the President of the European Council, and the President of the European Commission. In order to launch the European positioning and the demand at the same time, okay, we accept these 28 points as a basis, but we would like to see urgently with the US and with the Ukrainians to see these 28 points in detail, because there are certain points where the Americans act without having consulted us, without, let's say, accepting, let's say, seeing the opinion of the EU, of Europeans. For example, there should be, point number 2, a non-aggression pact between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. But someone should talk to the Europeans before concluding such a pact. Someone to the Ukrainians. And if you look at this whole catalogue, I see certain parts which have been on the table since 2015, the famous Minsk agreement, and which were for me, till my last day in Moscow, it was 2019, clearly foreseeable and to some extent not avoidable. We know it has to be to some extent a bitter peace to stop Vladimir Putin. Because remember, the aim of the Russians is from the beginning the same. The Russians want to take over Ukraine because they consider Ukraine as a country belonging to them, or reach at least what we call in Western Europe a Belarus situation or Belarus state. And therefore, how to stop under the given circumstances after 3 years of war, where Putin does not show any signal of stopping, how to stop him. And I know it's an extremely difficult task for the Americans.
Yes.
He would like to reach this as, let's say, after Gaza, his next, let's say, step of bringing about somewhere at least a ceasefire or peace in the longer run. There are interesting parts in these 28 points, but certain points the Europeans get the feeling it's done behind, not with them, and only in the American interest.
Okay, I see your point. Mr. Rene, Reuters cites anonymous sources about threats to reduce intelligence and arms. How plausible is such a move politically inside Washington? How does Washington view this move?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a concern, and it's definitely something that the diplomats and leaders are going to have to pay very careful attention to. But again, not really sure about how much this balance and concern is really going to impact the overall decisions that need to be reached when it comes to negotiating this peace. I mean, President Zelensky he's got to be facing one of the most difficult balancing acts of any particular leader at any point in our history. I mean, the stakes could not be higher for him, and the difficulty in negotiating this can't be more. I mean, it's unimaginable. On one hand, Ukraine is so dependent on the United States for their military assistance, from ammunition to defense systems. I mean, we even saw how the reaction on the Tomahawk missiles, that those discussions here a few weeks ago were so upsetting to what might happen in the region. But then, with that support, Ukraine is able to support the war. Without it, it's going to be completely compromised. And so Zelensky has to balance the dependency with the dignity for these negotiations. And what we're hearing about this plan right now, I mean, again, the details, it sounds like that they're still very confidential, and we're going off of things that have been leaked, which are causing significant friction, whether it's a division of territory, whether it is amnesty for Russian troops, whether it's something that comes down to, again, territory disputes. I mean, this is going to be pressure on all sides. But again, even though if this plan is taken, or parts of it are taken and accepted, we are going in the right direction. I know, like when we talked about what happened with Israel and Gaza, there are setbacks. There will be setbacks to this once the peace plan is negotiated. There will be setbacks, but the thing is that we need to be looking forward. We need to find ways to build trust. There has to be European involvement, because again, without that European involvement, it affects Europe more than it impacts the U.S.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Mr. Bitterlich, now, how are NATO structures likely reacting to potential U.S. pressure on Kiev, given alliance sensitivities?
Well, it's normal. The Americans are, let's say, the leader within NATO. It's clear that the Americans, insofar, will execute a certain pressure on the Europeans. But again, at the end, the Europeans will have to defend one treaty, this plan, even at home. And the Ukrainians will have to defend it at home too. We may discuss about, let's say, the personality of Zelensky. We could discuss for a long time, but take this number 25 in Ukraine will take place 100 days after the conclusion of this agreement, elections. In Russian eyes, this means that Zelensky has to leave at the end, and Ukrainians will have to vote, as they have done once in the past, for, let's say, a pro-Russian president. What to do? Or the other text, 26, all this conflict participating parties will obtain full amnesty. You know that there is a mandate against Putin from the International Criminal Council. But how to sell this to people that the Russians have been the aggressive side, have been attacking Ukraine with their conviction, okay? But attacking, and suddenly no one, let's say, is punishing them anymore insofar. Beside, let's say, 100 billion US dollar we could use for the reconstruction of Ukraine. For the rest, the Russians are, let's say, at the end of the day, the winners. I understand the Americans, because they see the situation as it is for the moment. They see the occupation of the Crimea. It's clear for me this has been a loss from the beginning, since 2014. And but the whole east of the Ukraine, let's say this 20% of the territory, which has been, let's say, the hardcore of the Soviet armament industry in the past, totally destroyed area. And the Russians take it as it is. And it's difficult to explain to Ukrainians who would like to stop the war. Yes. I get voices from Ukraine that they are tired by this war.
Yes. Mr. Rene, Do you think that the United States officials view this pressure campaign as leverage or as a last minute corrective to a stalled war strategy? We're approaching almost 4 years of the war now.
You know, I don't think that's an either or. I think it's probably a combination of both of those things. You know, the way I see it is this is a moment in a test of Western unity, and I'm betting that that Putin is looking at that in a very similar way. You know, if we're going to start seeing diverging interests and diverging political pressures, you know, with Europe worried about its own security, the U.S. trying to end the conflict on its own timetable, and Ukraine just trying to survive and protect its future. You know, those are all diverging interests that certainly that Putin can exploit for his own benefit. And if I'm Putin, I'm probably thinking that if I can just wait out this long enough, there's going to be a lot of pressure and there's going to be fractures into this, and he's going to have an opportunity to exploit this moment. So if we emerge from this G20 meeting, even without necessarily an agreement on the specifics of the peace plan, but at least a pathway, at least something where we can still stay unified, and refuse to acknowledge those cracks that would just be natural to form anyway, we can hopefully shape the next phase of this conflict into something that can focus on the pathway to peace. Again, Russia's got to be watching this with extreme interest and likely with a sense of opportunity. The West is tired. The United States is tired of funding this and the meetings that have gone back and forth. I mean, we definitely want to see a pathway to peace, but you know, the Kremlin is just looking for its opportunity to maintain superiority on the battlefield. And if the U.S. and Europe can't agree, if the U.S., Europe, and Ukraine can't agree, then Russia will continue to push for terms that are favorable to itself, or just try to find a way to win them on the battlefield.
Of course. Mr. Bitterlich, what risks do European leaders see if Kiev is pushed into signing too quickly?
Well, the Europeans see, let's call it a limping agreement to a large extent, where most sacrifices are on the Ukrainian side, not on any other side. And when you look at what our American friends have been writing down there, it's, let's say, settling the guarantee, settling the security of, let's say, the remaining Ukraine. But, the Europeans have got about this, let's say, more and more doubts whether the Americans are still, let's say, the reliable partner. Let's look at this objectively. It's not for me, let's say, a subject of negotiation. It has to be done behind the curtains. I hope very much that these 28 points may become, let's say, the real basics, could become at the end a basic line of an agreement for ceasefire at least, and then for beginning, let's say, to enter into a second step. I see there are positive ideas in this peace plan, yes. It's a bit, seems to me, a bit done in order to get the Russians on board, more than anything else, more even than the Ukrainians. But Ukraine is in a certain internal crisis at the same time. I think, well, Thanksgiving is always, let's say, in the US, let's say, a special day. Donald Trump idea to get all of them on board for Thanksgiving, well, I respect very much. And the most important is at the same time, the Ukrainian population is suffering more and more. I don't speak of those who are, let's say, finding, let's say, their profit in these fights of the last 3 years.
Yes. Well,
But
apparently,
the normal population, and they are suffering,
yes,
and they fear the next winter, because the Russians are attacking in a permanent way, either directly the population or, let's say, the electricity grid and the electricity work in the Ukraine to get a cold winter there.
Yes,
And
well, yes, apparently
understand the
you
American
both agree
interests,
that
understand
what's going on is,
to hurry up. Yes.
yes, everyone sees it as a positive step, regardless of the details of the plan. But the question is, Mr. Rene, is Congress unified or divided on the idea of conditioning support to Ukraine?
I don't think that that there could be unification in Congress, unified on just about anything.
About
In the
anything.
United States, they can't even keep the government open. Again, and I don't mean to be sarcastic about that. But what I think that we need to look at here, and where I do think that where we can find some agreement here, is to resist the temptation to prioritize speed over the substance of what's happening here. This isn't just about the details of the plan today. It's about preventing the next war tomorrow. Because if Ukraine is left in a weakened state, there could be a regrouping, and we could end up having another war here in a few years. Which again would put us right back where we are with Europe, staring down these dangers all over again. So, I mean, we've got this situation that with this conversation that's happening at the G20. I mean, I do hope that it continues to focus on peace, but not necessarily sacrificing that for speed, because these conversations can be as much about preventing the current war and solving that. But you have to be strategic about this and find out, how are we going to prevent the next one? Because again, if there is a solution here and a pathway to peace that leaves Ukraine too weak, or Europe weakened in this, it's just going to empower Russia to come back again later. So this peace plan, this discussion has to be something that is durable and lasting, and something that is rooted in protecting the sovereignty of everyone involved. It can't just be a rush here. So again, speed is important. The unification of the allies, whether it's Congress, the president, the Europeans, that's something that's going to still be maintained under stress. It's going to take a lot to keep these folks unified. But if we can look and keep our eyes on the prize of preventing the next war and ending this one at the same time, again, these are the exact right discussions we have.
Mr. Betterlech, we're running out of time, so I want a brief answer to this question, please. Could Europe present an alternative pathway to the US-backed roadmap at the G20?
I think it would be possible. But let's say, using the American 28 points as the basis for negotiation. Some would like it different, but I think the Europeans would like to enter now into, let's say, a debate with American friends, how to improve these parts to get it acceptable for the Europeans and at the end of the day for the Ukrainians.
Okay. Mr. Rene, briefly, how is the U.S. assessing Zelensky's willingness or resistance to any territorial concession implied in the draft plan?
Yeah, it goes back to that balance of the dignity versus the dependence. And remember the very tense meeting that Zelensky had in the Oval Office here, several months ago. He has to be focused on peace. He has to be focused on trying to find this pathway versus just trying to breathe more life into the fight. Putin has to do the exact same thing. And so, again, we have to get these leaders to the point where they're both focused on a lasting peace and not continuing the conflict. Again, that's difficult when we are talking about concessions. But concessions have to come from all sides, and it has to be something that, again, creates peace and prevents further conflict.
We'll just have to wait and see. But for now, I'd like to thank you so much. Mr. Ukaine Betterlech from Berlin, thank you so much. And Mr. Dan Rene from Washington, thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen, for your in-depth insights on this fast-moving and consequential moment in global diplomacy. And as the G20 gathers and deadlines tighten, Europe and Washington confront a crossroads in the Ukraine war. We will follow every development, and we will, of course, be updating you on the latest developments. But that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Amel Al-Hamlawi, thank you so much for watching.